Greg, what the hell's the cloud?
Everyone's constantly chasing their tail.
I didn't know for a long time, then I thought I knew, now I don't know again.
I love it. Are we still talking about food?
Believe me when I tell you, we can always go back to talking about food. There's always a pivot there.
Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast.
And we are here for yet another. Can you believe that you're still here for another episode of the Anycast? And I am here today with, first of all, a genuinely amazing human being, pretty darn good at business and leadership and other things too. But the human being thing comes first. But I can't even give you a proper introduction. But Greg Moss is here today. Greg, tell everybody a little bit about your origin story, where you came from, how we got here, why we're here today.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Matt. This was a special surprise to hit my inbox, so I'm very excited to be here with you. My origin story could go, it's funny, I don't know which way to start on the origin story because I have a really deep origin story that relates to when I was a child, where we can accelerate that and come more present day. I'll give you a little bit of both. So I started off as a kid growing up in the Bronx, underprivileged kid, and use that as kind of my driving force behind wanting to be in business. Had two parents, split house. Mother, late in life, decided to make a lot of money in sales, and a dad who was super conservative with a philosophy background. And so those were my two paths, right? Do I go conservative philosophy or do I go high income sales? And the high income sales at that age was something that was really appealing to me. So that's been kind of the big driving force behind me wanting to build success into my career and drive and be better and just overall. So career started off in biomedical engineering and slowly ramped into sales, and sales stuck with me. And through all the businesses that I worked in, I was able to culminate enough experience to ultimately start my own business or feel comfortable enough starting my own business. And that took me from, selling fish hook holders at an early age. I started a company called HookSafe. This is my first company. And
I did not know. Hold on. I have to I've never interjected in an intro before, but I need to. This is like one of my fears growing up. Fishing was always around, like stabbing myself with the fish hook. So I feel like I needed this in my life at an earlier age. But
it's a big deal. And this was the first signs of entrepreneurship in my life was that I saw my someone in my life fishing and saw these entanglement of hooks, and then correlated that out to using a piece of a noodle, one of the pool noodles, as a way to kind of just sink them in and tap the leaders into the bottom. It was super easy to hold them in a safe way. So I wanted to try to bring this to market. And after a year and a half, $10,000 or $20,000 later, realized I didn't have the experience, but did learn a lot. And that was really the point where I said, I love this entrepreneurship. I love building. I love creating markets. And from there, I ended up landing a job in recruiting, which was a combination of legal recruiting and technology recruiting. Technology recruiting took me obviously into technology. I realized that's where my passion lied. Got to meet some really smart people in my career that allowed me to learn under them, and ultimately ended up where I am today, which is at a company called UPSTACK as a managing director, and I'm still the CEO of CloudAdvise, which is my consulting practice.
Excellent. And there's a lot of dovetails to go from there. But give us and we'll tell people how to fast forward through the sales pitch. But give us the 30-second to 2 minutes on CloudAdvise and or UPSTACK.
So they're similar, right? But I think I want to remove the fluff from what I do. I'm a big believer in getting to the point. I've learned to remove a lot of the marketing from what I talk about in business. So I want to do that here. We just help companies buy infrastructure all over the world. And when I mean infrastructure, I'm talking really data center, cloud, and connectivity. And we do this in a way that I think is different than anyone else. We use data, millions of data points collected throughout many years of others buying infrastructure all over the world. And we take these data points and leverage them to help our clients get the lowest price point and the best terms on their contracts. As
somebody who has also been buying those things, like I can say my ideal world is using you guys for everything. But who's a fit? That's always been like an interesting thing for me when I look at channel or telecom agencies or stuff like that. Like, who is your ideal customer, and how do you think about finding them?
So anyone's our customer. Everyone may not feel this way, but I think technology is at a point now where it's critical to anyone's business, right? So that means everybody's using connectivity, everyone's using infrastructure, whether it's cloud or data center to some extent. So you could divide this into two categories: large companies and small companies. Small companies don't have the luxury of having procurement departments. So leaning on a company like myself, it allows you to carve out an enormous amount of time and put that back into the kitty, so you can use that building technology, right? Where we'll take on the pieces of identifying vendors based on quality of service and other metrics, and then obviously going out and negotiating for you, ultimately delivering back to you kind of the filet mignon, right? The important information that you can now start making decisions off of. The larger companies, they have procurement teams. The problem here is that their procurement teams tend to be non-technical. So when they go out and they want to bid a project, they're including everybody, only really just because of lack of experience. And this is causing vendors to spend an enormous amount of time around deals they'll never win. And then internally, you're reviewing content from people that isn't applicable. So we're able to quickly, again, disseminate, there's 15 vendors in the market, and here's only 8 that really fit what you're doing, and here's really only 4 that are relevant. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, we save everybody a ton of time. We help procurement be better by giving them research and data that they can ultimately bring back to the tech team so they look better. So larger companies, we align with both tech and procurement. Smaller companies, we essentially are procurement.
It's interesting. The common element to both of them, though, is you're selling both of them time back. It's just in different ways, right? Like for the small company, it's go work on your product, and for the larger team, it's stop wasting resources, time, et cetera. Which is interesting because I struggle with this, and I don't know how you view it for yourself or for your customers, to be honest. But with me, it's like I get frustrated sometimes because I walk around and everybody thinks time is free. Like, how much time can we spend saving another 0.8% on this deal, totally ignoring the opportunity cost of having the thing, whatever the thing is, whether that's equipment, whether that's data center services, whether that's bandwidth. Like we started the project ostensibly because we were like, hey, if we have this, it generates value for us. And then everybody goes, well, hold on, we can slow down how quickly we get the value by creating all these sort of seemingly useful stopgaps and milestones and things like that, and frequently, people ignore the cost of having a meeting, right? Like you get 10 people in the room, you say the opportunity cost for each person is $500 an hour, and you're in the room for an hour.
Gets expensive quick.
At the end of the meeting, you figured out how to save $1,000. And everybody feels really good because, hey, we just saved the company $1,000. And it's so, like, to me, time is frequently like a very hidden cost. How do you see your time today? And B, what's your experience in the way other people see that time savings? Because honestly, in my brain, until we're having this conversation, I'm like, the reason to use an agent is it'll, save me the bullshit, not necessarily time, but like save me the bullshit and ideally a better price. But never like, and we can move faster, which is worth way more than the bullshit headache or, the presumed cost savings.
I love the question. I think it's a really important question. Even when you associate time to anything, right? Not just work, it's a luxury. I mean, it really is if you think about it, right? Now, bringing that internal and figuring out how do I save time as a business, I think it's critical. I'm OC, right? I'm OCD. I have my schedule. Every minute that I get in between meetings, I try to use in some way, shape, or form. So to me, time is urgent.
Yeah.
companies, you want to use a pure play or an expert in anything that you're not an expert in, or you want to try to. So for instance, the luxury that we have is we see across all verticals, right? Non-for-profit, finance, publishing, you name it, right? We see it. And we see anything from a small company to a Fortune 10 company. And having that luxury allows us to look at who's doing what good and who's doing what bad. I'm not sure I said that properly, but who's doing things good and who's doing things bad. And we're able to take that data and share that back with our clients, right? So they're seeing it from their purview. We're seeing it from everyone's purview. And so we're able to, like I said, quickly say, what are you looking for? And then quickly associate that to everybody that we're working with in the market, because we work with everybody.
Sure.
It's a very easy thing for us to do. Sometimes it could take people weeks just to identify vendors. Then they have to find contacts within those vendors. And sometimes those contacts come from contact forms on websites. Sometimes they come from LinkedIn. Are they getting the right person? Some of these larger organizations have defined groups that have to work on specific initiatives. So it becomes, sometimes you're 3 months into a project and you're just getting them out the information that you want them to provide back to you. And then that's a whole nother process. Think about doing that internationally, right? So you're a U.S. company now looking for space in mainland China. Is there a language barrier? Is there a currency barrier? And so all these things play a role. And, we've finished projects for clients in a matter of days that would normally take them many, many, many months. And so I think if you put it into that kind of perspective, you can get a lot of time back. Like we've saved chief technology officers in small and mid-sized companies, I'd say anywhere between 10 and 15 hours a week during project timing, so, and that's a big deal.
Sure. You said something as well, I think that's important, which is I've been noticing more is frequently I think I like the company I'm dealing with, but what I learned is that I like the team I'm dealing with, and they're not the same. There's a few in both directions. Like there's a few relationships that have gotten way better after somebody took over our account. And on the flip side, there's a ton of relationships that we're like, oh my God, this is our preferred vendor for this. Anytime we use them, we can. Somebody either not even leaves, but just gets promoted. And now all of a sudden the day-to-day account team is somebody new and they don't know the ins and outs. They don't know the angles and they don't know the history. And you just like, this company I really enjoyed doing, I thought I enjoyed doing business with, now I just want to bang my head against a wall. And, it's people that can navigate the system, whatever that is. It doesn't matter. Forget tech, forget procurement, forget anything. Like if you know somebody who can navigate the system in any business, there's so much value there that it can unlock. And on the flip side, when you lose it, at least with me, it makes me go like, well, why am I doing this? Well, how did I get involved with these people? So like you've been it's a long-winded way of saying, Greg, you've been doing this a long time. How important for you is it to have the right relationships? Like you mentioned, you work with everybody, but so does everybody works with everybody. And yet a lot of people can't get things done, or certainly not as well as you're able to do it. Is that the people on the other side of the table? Is that your experience? Like how does the relationship play together?
This is another really good question. There's active vendors and there's inactive vendors. Or, you have a vendor where you set up a 1 gig internet line with Lumen, right? You're never going to revisit it. You're going to every year or every 2 years you want to renegotiate the price, right? But you never have to think about that because Lumen has a great service. But their process to getting to that service is a headache. So the question is, are you okay doing a lot of work up front to get a stable service that you really don't have to revisit? Then there's active services, right? Or active vendors where you are constantly engaged with, like you said, a sales organization or an operational organization within that vendor to get things done because you just have to, whether it's move ads changes or whatever it's going to be. And that gets sticky because no one stays around forever, like you said. And you can find yourself going from the A team to the D team overnight. So having someone like us in place obviously creates that buffer, right? Because you always have us. But let's say you don't have us. I think you just need to be clear that when you engage with a vendor, you're not just getting your sales team or your operational team's contact information. What are the escalation paths? Who goes above them? Who goes above them, whether it's billing, sales, or operations? And then once you have that data, you never have to worry that if we lose a component that we're at ground zero, right? You always have that escalation path. More importantly is if you start to build a relationship with the escalation point, right? That senior person within that organization, one of your concerns should always be, I'm always worried that we're not going to get the great service we're getting today, right? So it's okay to have that dialogue. I mean, it doesn't have to be every day, but every quarter there should be a touch point with important vendors that you're active with to see where the health of that team is. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, one of the things I think is hugely helpful, not that we do it a whole lot, but we wish we could do it more, is like keeping track of and giving vendors a vendor scorecard. From our standpoint, right? Is like, hey, this is what we did. Here's where you were green. Here's the stuff that's a little amber, and here's the stuff that's red. And because vendors really never get feedback, especially on the stuff that's green. Right? Like it's tough to call a vendor and be like, hey, I just wanted to call you today to tell you all the services you told me you were going to deliver, you delivered. But they need to hear that as well as and this is why I'm happy with them, and this is where you exceeded expectations, and this is why I want to grow more with you. But it's hard, right? Like it's vendor management is, in some organizations is a full-time job or 50. But even then, it's usually procurement-y. It's not feedback based. And I've found anytime we have a tight feedback loop with anybody, vendor, client, team member, nothing ever gets worse, right? Like it's one of those things. It's like, can't guarantee it gets better. Usually it does, but it never gets worse. And so this is my reminder to make myself a note after we record this episode, like do more vendor scorecards. Okay, I'm going to totally change directions on you because you're the man to ask.
Well, I do want to say one thing to that. I want to add to that. So to me, I'm a big believer in vendor-client relationships, right? And having that relationship, I think, is critical to enable them to support you internal to their organization, right? The better your relationship, the more they're going to want to represent you as they ask for things. So I definitely say that's an important factor. Scorecards, I think they're important. It doesn't have to be a formality, right? It doesn't have to be in a particular format, but you're right. I think giving them the feedback, negative and positive, is critical. So that's well taken.
Yeah. So switching gears to CloudAdvise things and stuff. Greg, what the hell's the cloud? I didn't know for a long time. Then I thought I knew. Now I don't know again. When you talk cloud, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about what the client's talking about, right? So I'm leading them. The cloud means many things to many people. I think as a general term, a cloud infrastructure is just it's more of an operational expenditure as opposed to a capital expenditure. It's just a way to put things into an environment where you're just spending on them differently and using them differently. And that could have many examples. So I really let the client drive what they feel the cloud is to their organization. Right? Because you have public cloud, which are the big three, AWS, GCP, Azure. You have private cloud or bare metal, right? There's a lot of things. You have UCaaS. People look at UCaaS as a cloud platform because you're taking your on-prem telephone system and putting it into something that doesn't exist necessarily on site. So, again, there's so many different variations, but I think the general definition is really just, a way to use an environment that's hopefully constantly updated and sitting there out off-prem in a meaningful way to your business.
Got it. So with that in mind, with a broad definition of cloud, it can and cannot and does and doesn't work across a variety of opportunities for a variety of different people. What I see today is a ton of now declouding or a little bit of cloud backlash because people that thought it was the answer might have just been asking the wrong question. Not to date. I try not to talk about current events on anything, but LinkedIn, owned by Microsoft, announces inability to move to Azure after 3 years of trying is an interesting case study in probably a few different things, and one of which is sometimes the cloud is not the answer, even when it seems like it should, would, could be. How do you see, like, are there any definite waving green flags for you when people want to talk cloud, or definite waving red flags?
Absolutely. So I think we should go back a bit and remember why the cloud became what it is today. And when I'm talking about public cloud, I use Barnes and Noble as this example because it's a great example. You talk about an organization, way back when, that had a huge climb in business around the holidays. And I remember having them as a client many years ago. They would buy infrastructure, millions and millions of dollars worth of servers to sit in their data centers to be used a month and a half, maybe 2 months a year. And if you think about that, right, over 3 years, that hardware becomes old, it becomes dated, and potential for issues. And at this point, you've used that hardware for about 6 months, right? So the use case of having the public cloud to create this bursty seasonal play was, to me, one of the biggest original use cases of this, right? And it made sense. If you have applications that need to have high and low seasons, spin it up when you need it and spin it down when you don't. But it's become something bigger than that. And it's become this thing where everything needs to be in it in order to function, which is not the case, right? Hybrid has existed just as long as the cloud. And more importantly, it's a lot more efficient, both technically and economically. So when you go all cloud, if your applications don't fit snug, you're going to find yourself grossly overpaying for ingress and egress traffic, which is a massive cost these days. And you're going to be paying for high compute that you may or may not need. It depends, right? And then you have a lot of applications that shouldn't be in the cloud because while there's probably ways to put them in the cloud, they're just not there yet, whether it's an Oracle instance or Unix, right? There's a lot of still, mainframe. There's still a lot of these applications that are still immature as it relates. They're quickly coming up with solutions, but even though those solutions exist today, they're still not where they need to be in order to be as efficient as having something on-prem.
Sure. And so those sound like the red flaggy ones. Is there, the green flag was seasonal. Vertically, is there anything that jumps out at you as like cloud is going to fit 99% of the time, or is that back to forcing people into the cloud because they were told to buy from cloud because cloud? Like the usual answer I get for cloud is because cloud.
Yeah, well, you have to realize who's making the decision, right? If you have a guy who wants to be on the forefront of technology or a girl that's sitting in this organization, it's not coming out of their pocket, right? Their personal checking is not being emptied out because of the cost of AWS. They just want to be in it. It's easier. There's lots of tools, lots of functionality. So that's a big driver of this. The budget owners don't care. The budget owners, the non-budget owners don't care. The ones that are operating this and using this at a large scale within organizations. As far as specific types of companies that should or shouldn't use the cloud, obviously e-commerce is a massive use case, I think, for the cloud. A lot of SaaS platforms are really good for the cloud. But again, we're talking public cloud still, right? I'm not talking about, want to start talking bare metal, we could start talking about, ad tech, right? There's a really good way to utilize ad tech type companies for them to utilize like a bare metal cloud where, because they need refreshes. And when you want to have these Aerospike servers and have the latest and greatest, you're not going to find yourself buying them every 3 years. You're probably buying them every year, and that's not cost effective. So when you go into a bare metal type of environment, there's a situation where anytime there's an upgraded processor or something new, they could spin it up.
Sure. Well, and I have my little ecosystem of who I think of as fellow, procurers of things and stuff. And, typically for most people that I know that buy data center, infrastructure, servers, all that stuff, they're like COGS related things. I don't know a lot of people who handle or talk about handling, below the line expenses when it comes to infrastructure. But it occurred to me talking to somebody the other day that like whether it is COGS or not COGS, there's a ton of people like, because my question is always like, who are these people that are talking about cost savings in cloud? And the answer is like, it's the people who built a data center on-prem and, pay MSRP for Dell servers plus a premium for support. Like there's this huge snapshot of like, I want to say the world, but like enterprise or people who are like not technical organizations who, I spend 100x less than them for bandwidth today, let's say. And so, now with that said, cloud would cost me 30x. But in the middle, there's a room where they save money because cloud is only 30 times more expensive than what I pay. And they're paying even more than that. So like, I always forget about this world of people who just like, either because they don't buy volume or it's not their core business or because people are building little, fiefdoms or whatever. There is a ton of bloat in a lot of IT budgets. And I could see in a bloated budget cloud making sense and people going, wow, you delivered cost savings by moving to the cloud. Thank you so much.
But most of these people will still have bloat just in the cloud, right? So if we're talking about someone who has bloat in their generalized on-prem infrastructure, they're not the type of company that's putting in a cloud governance plan that's going to keep things stable and pristine, right? And that's another big issue that we could talk about at some point is all these companies aren't putting in the proper cloud governance. So a lot of the overspending beyond that ingress exacerbation is in the fact that they're not controlling who buys and how they buy or instances that are running that shouldn't be running.
Well, we'll talk about that because that's something that, again, as somebody who doesn't do a whole lot in the cloud, that's not something I think about. I'm the guy who says, why is this AWS charge a gazillion dollars on the credit card? And how did this happen?
Yeah. Well, you have it on a credit card. They have bills that are 70 or 80 or 100 pages long that make absolutely no sense. So imagine getting remember the old school MCI bills like you get when you had a wall phone in a business, not even in your home. So you can imagine what those bills look like now. Multiply that times 1,000. That's what these cloud bills look like. Hard to disseminate. But you have a situation where a lot of these larger organizations could have anywhere between 50 and 500 people buying off of AWS or Google, and there's no real communication or parameters around how they buy. And again, we're talking about people that don't own budgets. It's not coming out of their personal checking account. So if an instance stays up for an extra 2.5 months, why do they care? And so I think, my word of advice is cloud governance, no matter how small of an organization you are, is an important process to document because it'll really, if you are going to use the cloud, it'll minimize the overspending and hopefully put you in a good place.
Sure. And, for those companies that are going through that process, right? Like I assume the cloud evolution for most people is somebody buys it on a credit card, then they expense it. Then at some point it hits the expense report. Like it's a lot of, internal advocacy turning into, infrastructure strategy other than the places where it's top down, which is probably worse.
Yeah.
Right. CEO said we must move to the cloud.
The worst.
Well, let me tell you how this project's going to go. You don't even need to. I don't even need details. It's just like it's not going to work.
We've never had that in tech. Have you ever had a non-technical CEO or non-technical board member say, "Well, why is our competition in the cloud? We have to be there. We're going to the cloud." Like, okay.
Well, and imagine, like you said, go back 20 years. Our competition's in this data center. We need to move. Said nobody ever. And actually, that's an interesting. Obviously, on the CDN side, we compete with the cloud's CDN products, and one of the analogies I have a hard time trying to figure out is, and because outages have their own, especially in like tech circles, outages have their own emotional baggage, around them, and so I never want to be like outage focused per se, but like. I think there's a problem that happens if you just say, whatever you do, whatever vertical you're in, like I'll say it's video delivery, that's your retail thing. Let's say 9 out of 10 video delivery platforms, whatever that looks like today, are being built now on, say, AWS. Whether that's true or not is irrelevant. But you just have 9 out of 10 retail services using the same wholesaler. Putting the technology and outages, and not even outages, just problems, whatever, to the side. I just feel like if you're in that space, whatever it is, and your customer calls you and says, hey, I'm unhappy with your competitor. I'm thinking about making a move because XYZ reasons I have with the product. Let's just say it's lead times, right? Oh, I called your competitor. They said it's 6 months to get inventory in. And you go, no, we use the same person, 6 months for us too. And then you call the next person and go, yeah, no, it's 6 months for us too. And then like you call down the line, one person is going to go, oh yeah, I can get you inventory tomorrow. And like it becomes a competitive advantage when you're actually not using the same quote unquote infrastructure as all your competition. And that's something I think about a lot when I talk to people, is just like, okay, well, if you're all going to build on the same technology platform, how do you differentiate when that platform is actually like an integral part of service delivery? And I think it's hard. And I think people buy into the cloudiness a little too early, to the point where now, like, what could have been a competitive advantage, what could have been a differentiator, we do it this way. Like, yeah, the days where CloudFront is having problems to Comcast in Massachusetts, we are not, is an advantage sometimes for people. But there's just this whole, startup credit thing where people end up all building competitors on the same underlying infrastructure. And like, I'm of the school, maybe I'm just old school, like infrastructure used to be an advantage, whether it was a cost advantage, whether it was a quality of service advantage, but like I cared where I built because I thought that could help me compete in the market. Mm-hmm. And today it's like everybody seems to want to just be like, well, we'll all build on the same infrastructure and we'll just see like, who hires the best 3 coders. I mean, you're an infrastructure guy. Like, can infrastructure be an advantage? Is it?
In certain applications, yeah. I mean, so I see the problem that you're posing, and it is a problem. So before we talk about, infrastructure being an advantage, let's first talk about what these large companies are trying to accomplish by incorporating new products into their mix. Secondary products, tertiary products, right? I'm a cloud company, but now I'm going to offer CDN services, for instance. When they go to an organization and offer them services, they have a contract. Contract's not like what you and I are used to. Oh, we're going to charge you $10,000 in MRC. It's a global commitment. And that global commitment can be used or honored in many different ways. You're getting credits, you're not getting credits. Again, there's complexity, right? And so they agree to a spend over a period of time, 3 years, 5 years, whatever the negotiated thing is. And it's a lot of pressure, right? Because procurement comes in and negotiates these incredible rates, but with this bloated commitment. That doesn't happen today, but it does happen pretty quickly, or it comes quick, right? Because all these projects that you lose a person, you have attrition, and you didn't get this done in time, and next thing you know, you're overpaying. So what you would have just said, you know what? I don't want the bloated commit. I don't want any commit. If I want 5 cents, and then we'll deal with it. Instead, you get 3 cents, but then you end up paying 7 cents, right? Because you didn't hit your commits. So things like CDN or these secondary and tertiary services become a way for them to get credit towards that global commit, right? Even though it's not a necessary cloud service, it's a service. And so it becomes attractive and easy to get these people to commit, even though the service levels are much less, right? When I look at a cash fly, for instance, I look at high grade, high quality, as opposed to kind of just run of the mill. And that's one of the problems, is they kind of get them with the hooks in them to keep them in some sort of like Cloudflare type of environment. But back to infrastructure and advantages, I mean, very distinct use cases, right? You need to have access to a meet-me room, right? You need a direct on-ramp to a cloud. You need to be next to an ad exchange, a financial exchange. This is where infrastructure starts to really play a role in those decisions. And I'm starting to see less and less of that, right? 10 years ago, you'd have a company come in and they'd say, well, I have to be within a certain amount of distance from this. And now everyone has it. Because of whether it's a Megaport or a Packet Fabric, they're creating these fabric lines that just go everywhere. So that value, unless it's super case specific, is becoming less and less.
Sure. I was trying to think of other analogies that made more sense. And like one that comes to mind, thinking of you, is because you're a foodie type guy, as am I. And I'm like imagine if like you, out of every 100 restaurants, 99 said, we're just going to source everything from Cisco. Now, what happens is
the problem
at some tier of the market, that's what happens, right? But for people that are trying to get their name, like if you're a chef, right? The first thing a chef would say is, I want to go get better ingredients than the next guy or girl. Not, let's all start with the same ingredients and see who the better chef is. And see, who can make the best dishes with the exact same ingredients. That's kind of how I see cloud, right? It's like, let's all agree we're all only going to buy the same set of basic ingredients, and then we'll try and outcook each other. Whereas like a good, chef will be like, why would I want the same ingredients as you? I want better ingredients than you. That's how I'm going to compete with you.
So I love it. I love it. It's a brilliant analogy. So let's ask ourselves this. We're in so deep for an organization to come out and buy better product, right? Or better chicken cutlets. The risk associated with that in catching up or having the budget to compete is just, it's counterintuitive, right? You're going to see very few businesses outside of security. Security, I think your application and what you just described is the exact – everyone's looking to go to that farm and get that grass-finished beef, right? Because that's how important security is. But when it comes to something that's more of a commodity, you're going to get the fibrous chicken because it's over 3 pounds and has antibiotics injected in it from Cisco.
Sure. Well, but that's it. It's like I think it comes down to where, like, I always tell like AWS's original undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? And like, there's a ton of stuff. Like if I look at our business, I don't mind running our billing platform in the cloud. Who cares? Like, I'm not trying to differentiate how we build. Like, it doesn't matter to me where that compute runs. It doesn't matter to me if we ran all of our, desktop clients in the cloud that people log into when they're, log in to do customer, show up to customer service rep shows up for the day. I don't care where that VDI, like, who cares? But I care, who I'm connected to in San Jose to deliver our actual CDN bits. And like even unpacking to like SaaS, right? Is like, sorry, I actually do care where my servers are that reach my clients, because their whole impression of my application is how fast does it work? But
there's a difference between there's a difference between what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, right? And if they're in between those numbers, even though they can do better, at what cost? So I hear you, and I agree with you to a point, but it just becomes hard to justify that. Well,
yeah, and I hear your point, right? Which is like, if all you're going to build is if you're running a McDonald's and all you're going to sell is a Big Mac, sourcing better beef at 200% higher cost isn't exactly a business strategy either. So yeah, you're right. It is. Is it below, or if it's below the bar or above the bar, that's kind of the differentiator for people.
And cost to change. I mean, there's so many factors, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I go back to time. Like our original conversation, like even as somebody who's generally like, I'm not anti-cloud. I'm like cloud when it makes sense.
Amazing.
And I would say if I'm investing in a business, like it's fiduciary irresponsible for a startup CEO to not say we're building this in the cloud.
That's right.
Right? Like it would be crazy to be like, no, we're going to buy infrastructure first. That would be like irresponsible. But the second there's market, like you're at scale, it's irresponsible to keep it there.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like the fine line, right? Is like, until it's the smartest bet you can make.
Yeah.
But then as soon as you do know, it's the fastest way to improve your margins. And in a world of like tighter fundraising and people actually paying attention to business metrics again, it's almost like, it used to be a win if you got to put out a press release talking about how big your commitment to AWS was over the longest, good news. We've committed to spend $20 million with the public cloud over the next 10 years. Like that was like a ta-da.
Crazy.
It's like, well, you haven't done anything really. You've just spent
committed
money.
Overspent money.
Well, and then you end up buying those tertiary services.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. There's also one other factor that plays a role in once you're there, having trouble reversing out. I don't know a single company that is at headcount in technology. I think everybody's bordering between 60 and maybe if you're lucky, 80% headcount. And then within that headcount, you obviously have your A, B, and C, and D, and F players. So everyone's constantly chasing their tail. And this is one of the reasons why when salespeople come to me and ask me about jobs, I say, listen, go out and find the most urgent and relevant technology, and that's where you want to sell, right? Because what happens is no matter how fun and how cool your tech is, once you get on the radar of those groups, you just become a number, right? Every time you creep up, maybe you finally get up to number 3 or number 4, you drop back down to 100 because you know what? There's other priorities. And with low headcount, it's just it's cyclical and it's really, really hard.
Yeah. It is some percentage of cloud spend just a proxy for salary?
Meaning
like, hey, $200,000, a $200,000 cloud bill sounds like a lot of money, let's say. But maybe not if you need 4 less people to run it.
So that's a good question. It's probably more of an AI question, but let's relate it to the cloud. The people that get eliminated when there's a move to the cloud tend to be the people that were operating your data center, maybe some network infrastructure. But I think the big thing about cloud is you're then forced to use DevOps, right? And people that know how to operate your cloud infrastructure. So I think it's almost like for like, or if you're a company that's non-tech progressive, right? Let's say your finance, I call them non-tech progressive only because because of regulatory issues, they tend to be the last to adopt certain things. They're finally in the cloud, but let's say insurance, publishing, non-for-profit, you can't attract tech talent. You can't. So now you're trying to get to the cloud, but you can't attract DevOps people. So now you're forced to work with a third party. And you want to start talking about third-party costs? So again, it becomes even more exponential. So, I mean, it's just a weird dynamic, but I don't think there's a ton that gets displaced unless there's a particular use case. Like if you can just run in the cloud and not blink and have to worry about it, maybe. But it doesn't seem to be that way for a lot of companies.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen anybody who successfully said, by moving to the cloud, we're going to reduce our engineering headcount need, and actually has a reduced engineering headcount.
Yeah.
And if anything, it goes the other way, which is odd, right? Like my rational brain says, okay, if I can, take people who had to rack and stack and manage physical infrastructure and replace them with people who now can press a button and spin up, 200x more infrastructure than that previous person could ever manage, that there's some sort of leverage there. But the complexity overhead of how to manage it and how to scale it, and now you got to figure out how to like processize that and make that part of your organization. Like it's just more, especially today when people are building specifically to cloud specific features and things like that, it's more complicated to run cloud infrastructure. Like,
oh yeah,
it's not that hard to plug in a server, like in the nicest way possible to everybody, right? It's like it's not that hard to plug a server in. But God help me if I try and read somebody's CloudFormation template about how how they're going to spin up this type of servers. Then there's a staging environment. And then, to do the staging environment, then there's this different CloudFormation template and
security.
It's a lot of complexity.
Configurations. It's a ton.
Yeah. Total change of direction.
I love it. Are we still talking about food? Because you got me amped up.
We can go back. Believe me when I tell you, we can always go back to talking about food. There's always a pivot there. But this is a question that I've been asking a lot of successful entrepreneur types, and the answers, I'm not gonna affect your answer here. But like, what were you like as a student?
Are we talking middle school? Are we talking high school? Are we talking college? I was a horrible.
Did the answer change depending on which?
The answer slightly.
Yeah.
But no, let's talk about that for a minute. I had no attention span, right? I just couldn't focus unless it was interesting. I mean, that's really what it came down to. I found myself, interested in math to an extent because I understood it. But outside of that, school wasn't a great experience for me. I just, being confined to learn information that had no relevance to my interests or any rhyme or reason to where I wanted to be in life was tough.
So every single person I know that is a successful entrepreneur all gives that exact answer.
Really?
Almost word for word. Yeah.
Wow.
Like, I was terrible. I was good at things I found interesting, and everything else, it didn't appeal to me.
Well, we also like the entrepreneurial spirit. We like to be independent. We like to make our own decisions, and school's the opposite of that. It's confining, right? And you following rules. A lot of us are rule breakers. Well, not rule breakers, but we don't like to follow rules. We like to create rules.
Right. Yeah. Somebody told me the other day, it's like, you're a rule follower for any rule you agree with.
Exactly. Was that your answer?
It's like,
was that your answer?
What's that? Horrible student?
I'm saying, no, as an entrepreneur, did you also answer it similarly?
Oh yeah, I was a terrible student. Yeah. Horrible. Refused to do anything that didn't make sense. I did get schooled once. I remember I had a math teacher, Mr. Lowfort, and he was the head of the math department in my high school. And I was talking in class, and he was teaching, like, there's a few things in math that are just like, have no applicable anything. Like, here's a neat math thing that is inapplicable to anything, but it's a neat math thing, with all due respect to my math people out there. And I was just like, Mr. Levine, you just stopped talking. I said, sir, this is so pointless. And I was that kid too, right? Like, this was so pointless. Like, if you can give me one profession, just one, where I would ever use this information, I will sit down, I will shut up, and I will do the work. And he said, well, I accept your challenge. You would need to know this if you were teaching grade 11 math.
Oh, you fell into that one. You fell right into that one.
I said, you got me. I will sit down, I'll shut up, and I'll begrudgingly do this work that is still pointless. But you did.
I'm with you.
You did get me. No, I think you're right. It's the rule breaking, and it's the pattern recognition part of it of like, I see what you're doing, and I see 15 reasons why it's terrible, and I see a shortcut to, like, get to the end.
Yes.
Like, so I know why I was a terrible student. Were you able to, like, did you test well? Like, if at the end of the, semester or quarter or whatever, did you know the material enough to be testing well on it?
I mean, if you consider C's at best well, then yeah, we'll give it a yes. I think
okay, so that's a yes. Well,
did I have the potential? Absolutely. Like, if I sat down and I looked at anything I worked on, I could figure it out and do well at it. But I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't. I didn't want to do anything that wasn't interesting. So,
because what I found was I could generally notable specifics that were different. Math was one, biology was probably a different one, but anything else, I could probably get an 80% on the final exam.
That's good.
And that was but nonetheless, I got, so in talk about what are the standards in Ontario at the time, 51 was a pass on your high school.
Ooh, lucky you.
So I had a lot of 51s, which was mostly probably because my teachers didn't want to see me again. So I had a lot of 51s, but mostly it was because I didn't do I refused to do the homework.
Yeah.
Right. And like my entrepreneur brain was like, hold on, if I can get an 80%, let me get this straight. I need to do the homework so I can understand the material. And then at the end, you're going to test me. If I pass the test, can we concede that the homework worked and I learned the material? Like, why do I have to do the homework?
Big believer.
And the answer I always gave was a sales one. You don't understand the real world, Mr. Levine. In the real world, and I said, what real world are you talking about? Like, what company fired their top sales rep because they found out he didn't read the sales manual? Like, what are you talking about? It's not the real world. Sorry, yeah. Were they the top producer? Great. Congratulations. Not, well, we need to, unfortunately, you didn't go about learning the material to be the top producer correctly, so we're going to have to let you go. Said nobody ever. And so I was just like, that's a weird way to prepare kids for the world, because the world, I already knew the world was really not like that. Like, there's no points for reading the manual. It's not a thing. But anyway, that's enough about my
I like that. I mean, it's a great way to think about it, and you're 100% right.
Can you go back and tell most of my high school teachers that for me?
I would like to. I would actually like to tell the world that, because, the school my son went to, they didn't have homework until middle school. And I loved it because, and I still think middle school is a little too early to start homework. And I think that homework should be optional. So I've always believed that. And again, you have a grade at the end of the year, so there's your grade. I also think the curriculum that they teach in schools today, at least towards the end of your schooling, isn't relevant to real world experience and how you manage your finances, right? You should really have at least a class on what is credit card debt. Just the basic stuff that gets you off. God forbid, you don't have a parent to sit there and teach you.
We actually had one of the few classes I didn't get a 51 in was we had a class called Consumer Studies. And my recollection of this is we were like we just had a teacher who insisted that she teach it. Like, it wasn't really part of the standard curriculum. You couldn't go learn at other schools, but she taught it. And it was, I mean, dating myself here, but it was how to balance a checkbook.
I love that.
Yeah, it was like real life, how to pick ripe fruit at the just like dumb real world things that you would need that school doesn't prepare you for. That was a great class. I remember that class a lot. And I failed entrepreneurship, but I think I got a 51 in entrepreneurship now that I think about it. So my kids one is of the age now where I feel the need to and she's a great student. She's amazing. As a kid, I was, foreshadowing my terrible education. My parents took me out of school and I went on vacation for 6 weeks a year in the winter. And other people are saying that might not be the best thing to do to, let's say, my child now. And I was thinking about it, and there's the hey, the best thing you can do for them is let them see the world and experience different stuff. But then I was also trying to find an argument, basically. But it occurred to me, I was like, but actually what prepares them, not she's in kindergarten, a little early for kindergarten, but let's say, high school, middle school, high school, what prepares you more for the real world? Like learning how to never, ever, ever, ever get behind ever? Or learning how to catch up? And I feel like there's an advantage in the real world for kids who actually do fall behind and learn to catch up, because I can tell you every single person I've ever worked with ever has felt at some point that they are way behind and need to catch up. And if you've sort of followed the curriculum correctly, that's a skill you never learn as a student, right? Is like, do this homework on this date, then it's due, and then due date, and this and that. And it's sort of fed to you that you will have the correct amount of time to complete it. And I was just thinking that it's not as like catching up should be actually a really important skill in life. And schools don't teach that. But as a fellow horrible student, what were the takeaways that the process of education left you with that have helped you, that you are glad you experienced?
Before I answer that, I just want to say I'm a big believer in taking kids out of school for 6 weeks at a clip in lower school, possibly middle school, the early parts of middle school. I think from time to time in middle and upper, you could probably pull it off if the kid doesn't mind getting behind. But I agree. Learning to catch up is a great skill. I told my daughter when she felt overwhelmed in college, I said she's working 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, carrying sports, and I mean, you name it. I said, told her, pick your battles, right? Pick your battles. I said, you have your core classes that you want because you want to graduate with a degree in this, and this is where your interests lie. That's where your primary focus should be. If you need to do the bare minimum in the other classes and get that C or B or B minus or A minus, do it. Right. But that's how you balance your time. You don't just say, I'm just not going to do anything. Choose your battles, and that'll be, beneficial. What did I get out of school? Outside of the social aspects of school and getting all the defiance out of my system. And my parents, if God forbid they watch this, nothing. It gave me Matt, I want to be transparent here. I can't think of something outside of the friendships that I fostered, and I grew up in the Bronx. My high school had 8,000 kids in it. It was a crazy time, and it helped me learn to navigate life. It helped me with politics, social politics, which I think translates out to my business, and how to deal with the inner workings of such a grandiose thing. Whether it's the scheduling, my high school, it was a crazy schedule, just similar to college, but you're trying to navigate that in the hallways where there's maniac things going on, kids bringing guns to school, knives into locker rooms, graffiti everywhere, and teachers where half of them cared and half of them didn't care, right? So learning to navigate that and survive in that type of climate, I thought was pretty impactful and probably plays a substantial role in how I learned to navigate certain things in life. There's the candid. I know when we first started the podcast, you mentioned some things that I never said on camera. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you two more opportunities. This is always, I used to use this as an interview question for salespeople, because I always feel like, the number one skill a salesperson have is to make me feel something. Give me, can stick to business if you would like, but what's the best day of your career and the worst day of your career? And you can flip the order too. Worst day is usually the one to do first.
The best day of my career could actually be today, but I won't know for a couple more hours. So there's a very good chance that today could be the best day, but we'll say we'll put that on hold for now. I remember starting a company called Trust Cash, and it was the first time in my life I had to go out and raise money. I had never done it before, and I had no guidance. Again, it's me in a room by myself trying to figure out how to move and shake. And I used common sense and said, well, I have to start calling people, right? So I started calling people, and I started, those phone calls led to other phone calls, which led to other phone calls. And, I ended up landing a relationship with this guy, Jacob Barker, who was kind of a broker, right? And help people raise money. And then he brought me into his office and started introducing me to all these high net worth individuals. And this guy, Buddy Ortal, out of, I believe it was Tennessee, gave me $1.1 million for 51% of my business with a clawback provision that I could take back a certain percentage if I delivered on certain numbers. I mean, that's probably the best day of my career. You know, taking it from zero to 1.1 million successful raise was a big deal for me. The worst, you know, so I'm a little unique, Matt, because even the worst situations I've been in my life, I've been able to pull out and extract the benefit of those situations every time. And I feel like a lot of the mistakes and a lot of the bad situations that I've had in my career allowed me to be better and learn and get to where I am today. So I can't say there was a bad time in my career. I feel like those bad times shaped me, and they were probably the most impactful. They were more impactful to me to grow than the good times.
Sure. Was there anything that stands out to you then in the moment as feeling like, because the growth happens after, right? Like in the middle of the situation, you're not like, wow, I sure am growing right now.
Yeah, there is one.
Is there something that stands out to you as like that was the low?
I'm gonna have to redact certain names and things in this particular moment. So it was another fundraising effort. And my back was to the wall. This was a business I was raising money for, and we were probably a month, maybe 2 months away from having to close the doors to the business. And this would have affected many people. Not many, a handful, enough people. And there's a particular group that convinced me that I can raise money in the public markets if I did a reverse merger into a public shell, right? And unbeknownst to me and my naivete at the time, their intentions were to pump and dump the stock, right? And that was their intention. So while they gave me money, they never had intentions of me winning, right? Or the company winning. So that ended up over the next 9 months being an absolute nightmare, like complete and utter nightmare. Now, again, there is a silver lining, right? I operated a publicly traded company. I learned about 10Ks and all those other fun things, 8Ks, 10Ks. God, I don't even remember. Either way, it was bad. It was a pretty bad situation.
Okay. All right. We're going to go to the mailbag here. Got fewer questions for you. Cue the music. All right. Question for Greg.
Coming from Louisa down in South Carolina.
You know Louisa too? That's unbelievable. How are people's buying patterns different today than in the past when it comes to infrastructure?
It's actually a great question. I'm going to use a decade, maybe 2 decades of in between to kind of create some context. The technologies that exist today are sizably more complex. There's no more, I need a cabinet and 4 kW of power, right? Now it's more like I need a cabinet, 4 kW of power. I need to be sub 4 milliseconds back to AWS. And I need access to at least 3, what we would call tier 1 carriers that reach a certain amount of eyeballs in the market. So, I mean, that's substantially different than what existed, but that's being driven predominantly by the high growth and rapid growth in technology, and all the ancillary things that come with that. So I'd say it's become more complex and people are less educated, and it's changing way too quick.
Got it. What advice would you give to somebody starting out and trying to break into infrastructure sales?
Relevant and urgent. And I'll tell you, if the product that you're going to sell is not relevant and urgent, so imagine spending 60 hours a week selling something. Why wouldn't you want to sell the thing that's going to be A, the easiest to sell, and B, yield the most fruit? And the way to identify that is to find the relevant and urgent technologies. And if you're not going to do that, good luck climbing up a hill with roller skates.
I like that. All right, that's it for the mail. Only 2 people wrote in.
Woo!
Yeah.
Is that average, Matt?
Where are we going?
Do more people get more? Do more people get more mail views? I mean, am I on average?
We get between
here?
two and four. No, I mean you got both. You got
so
above
I'm on the
average
low
questions
end.
though.
So I'm on the low end of that, like my high school grade.
But yeah,
so
but you got above
like
average questions. So
okay.
that's better. Yeah, it's a quality thing, not a quantity thing. Ask anybody who gets fan mail. It's not about how many people write you fan letters. It's about the quality of those letters.
Yeah. Okay.
And how many people are telling you they want to stalk you. Do you see a different future coming that, like you mentioned AI, I think that's part of it, but like I feel like if I go back 15 years ago, wherever we were heading is kind of where we ended, and it wasn't particularly different than where we were. Like, especially when it comes to infrastructure stuff. Like, I feel like where we are today is where naturally you would end up with if you just go back 15 years and said, okay, do the same things for the next 15 years. You kind of end up here. Do you see anything coming around the bend that is going to blow people's, like, if I sent a time capsule back to 2023, Matt and Greg, we'd be like, oh my God, didn't see that coming.
Specific to infrastructure or just in general tech?
Just general tech.
Okay, so I'm actually going to give you 2 answers here. One, I want to relate this to infrastructure because most of our podcast has been around infrastructure, and then I'll talk kind of general tech. For infrastructure, outside of continued fabric growth and the mesh of tech, the mesh of connectivity, interconnecting everything, almost like a brain, neurons in a brain. That and the consolidation of cloud and data center, right? Does AWS buy Equinix? Does Microsoft, buy Interaction or DRT? I don't know. Right. But I do think that you're right. There is a bleed in it, and there's attrition in the cloud going back into hybrid, some of that data center. And once they stop that front end growth, they'll see that attrition. And maybe that sparks, the need to be in the data center or true hybrid within these organizations. Now, general tech, and this scares me the most. When people think AI, they think the Terminator, robots running around shooting everybody. It's really the collapse of reality that scares me, and watching how these videos and photos and this news that's coming out is so real, or appears to be so real, right? And then you have this population that doesn't know how to qualify that. So, I think at some point you run into a situation where 90% plus of what you could be looking at on a daily basis is in fact not real. And you don't know that. So it's a collapse of reality in some sense. And then you combine that with stuff like alpha persuasion, it gets pretty freaky. Yeah.
So tell me more about that. So today, obviously, are we talking deepfake type video? Like,
partially.
Is it
the tools to create, right? So the tools to create that stuff, and then the ability to continue to do it in large scale. And that's, the ability to do that is becoming more and more commonplace. Like I'm not a programmer.
And is it more impactful?
I think I just wanted to do it. I wanted to do it, Matt. Did I do it right?
Okay, we're going to leave that in then.
Right.
Yeah, you were good. What do you want to go? Do you want to answer that again?
No, not
or
at
you
all.
just wanted the X?
It was cool. Like I was like, I got to do this at some point.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Is it scarier because we can see it? Like, I for myself, I feel like you sort of never trusted what you read or what you heard, but you could trust what you could see with your own eyes, right? Like, so the idea of like, I can't remember the year, but like, there was enough people that were freaked out by War of the Worlds being read on the radio, however many years ago, where they thought, we were under attack by aliens. But you could look outside and then be like, okay, everything's fine. That's just notwithstanding, they got a lot of people freaking out, but you could sanity check it against something. And
Matt, when you go to a party and you talk to 10 people over the course of the next 4 hours, and 3 or 4 of those 10 people are telling you stories that are just they don't exist, and they're saying it with such vigor and conviction as though it's happening. I'm like, and then they're like, oh, it's not real? And I'm like, what? Like, I have to sometimes pull it up on my phone and be like, no, it's really not. Like, let me show you. That's crazy. Because think about how many people they talk to and the other people are going, what? Like, and not challenging them. It could become exponential.
Well, this goes back to the problem with the internet is it connects all the village idiots together. Like, people, it's not a uniquely new phenomenon for somebody to buy into a story and repeat it. Right? What's changed is the technology gives you scale to repeat it many, 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 many times much faster. And like, I heard somebody talk about like 2 things, but at the same time, which is like our brain is meant to care about like what's local and what's relevant to us, because that's all you ever used to be able to get, right? Like, you couldn't get Rome is falling. You'd get, hey, just so you know, a year and a half ago, Rome fell. You couldn't care that Rome was falling because the information took so long to travel to you. And then you like feed that in with like social media. I heard about the news, but it's the same thing, right? Like, so that, the news's job is to make anything happening to somebody feel like it's happening to you. Yeah. And those are hard, like they're amplification problems, right? But like, in theory, you could amplify, right? In theory, there should be just as many stories about why this is fake as there are about the fake story. But that's not clickbait. Like, the human being doesn't want to go tell me, I want the debunking, right? Nobody says that. What they want is the conspiracy theory, because that's of course interesting and juicy.
Yeah. Human nature, biology.
So I don't know. Like, that's what I mean. I don't think like it's a technology problem, but it's really a human nature problem, right? It's like, Mark Twain. It's easier to
one you can
fool a man than convince him he's been fooled.
Yeah, exactly. You can control one, you can't control the other. So I think, finding a way to notarize each piece of content at some point is going to be mandatory.
Right. And does that end up down some sort of like vortex inception where like you tell ChatGPT to write a program to detect ChatGPT written articles, and then like,
I mean, it's possible.
Like, how do you do that at scale? Like, how do you notarize that at scale?
It has to be. So first of all, it's like age verification online, right? When the internet was first created, I mean, we're here 20 plus years later, still creating laws around the internet. And we're a backwards country. We can't create laws quick enough. We can't do anything quick enough. So now we are adding, before we've completed putting a fence around the internet, we now have AI to exacerbate, not only exacerbate that, but also to exacerbate other things. So we have to start thinking about the legal ramifications and how do we contain this in a way that doesn't collapse society. And you think about things like alpha persuasion, right? This is a way where AI has the ability to look at trillions of things in seconds, right? We don't. So if AI wants to look at things and and find ways to manipulate, it could, right? If you were my target, Matt, and I said, you know what, over the next 6 years, I want you to convince Matt to not eat meat. Maybe through alpha persuasion, this AI could get in your head, having access to your emails, your social media, whatever it may be, and somehow feed you through advertisements and subliminal text, to now not eat meat.
If enough Instagram, influencers tell me it's bad, I have no choice but to, what am I going to do?
You're going to die.
So yeah. But is it what I'm trying to get to is and I don't disagree that it's coming. Is it that AI makes it cheaper, faster? Like producing, CGI or, videos that are of things that didn't happen has been going on for, it's the whole movie industry. Is it that it's accessible is at a level to everyone, or that you can make them faster so it fits in the current news cycle? Like how is AI the game changer?
The catalyst?
Yeah.
AI is allowing people, everyday people, to use tools to create.
Right.
And I'm talking about, if I want to be a music composer and I know nothing about music, I could be a music composer. I mean, that's it in its simplest form, right? So, you get all these people that are interested in being something. Well, you can be that now. You could write a song.
Right.
You could sound smart. You could sound stupid. You could sound like Obama.
I know how to do the second one.
You could.
Yeah.
That's not true. So I mean, I think that's kind of where things, where the rubber meets the road as it relates to that. And it goes on and on and on.
Yeah. Like that is what I see. Like my current joke is always, and whenever I'm talking about AI robot, and I'm like, when I can stick my hands in a hand dryer and it recognizes them as hands more than 5 out of 10 times, I'll be a little more worried about, the AI revolution coming. But I think it is, and I'm not much of a futurist. I'm pretty, I don't know, pessimistic, but I feel like I'm pretty realistic about technology advances and what's coming. And although a lot of it just seems to, this is the weirdest segue, but a lot of it just seems to happen and then it just keeps going and you don't think too much about it. Like the other day, somebody was telling me about polo players cloning horses. And I was just like, I remember Dolly. Like I remember it was a big deal that we could clone one sheep. And then that was the last I ever heard about cloning. And now it's like, oh, people clone horses all the time. And it's like, the novelty was that we couldn't do it. And as soon as we could do it, the novelty entirely went away and it wasn't newsworthy anymore. And I feel like that might be coming with some of the AI stuff. I mean, the how do you know what reality is a little more, what is consciousness is the other follow-up, right? Like, I don't know that those are solvable in a box, but, Chat GPT writes, composes music. It was only novel because it didn't before. Like, I don't think that's going to be a continuing narrative. Like, it will just be implied. Well, of course there's AI writing music. Duh. Now you can record samples on Pro Tools, said somebody.
It's the butterfly effect, right? What does the flap of a butterfly's wing ultimately cause? There's so many things happening right now that it's making the world change emotionally.
Sure.
And that, in this day and age, means a hell of a lot, right? Because emotional causes physical change.
Well, and I think that's it. I think it's that's what the use case is, right? It was like nobody necessarily said the great thing about inventing the microchip is that we could, manipulate people's emotions. But like some of the use case for AI is like, what the great thing about having AI is? We can get people to think whatever we want. Like it's an immediate jump. So I think that's maybe that's interesting. Okay, well, I hate leaving things on the AI futurist angle. Give me 2 sentences. What are you looking forward to in 2024? Personally, professionally?
Well, recently, I'm an empty nester. So I'm really looking forward to the days that my kids do come home. That's personally, that's a lot of fun. I'm also, from a business standpoint, I'm winding up at UPSTACK. And, there may be an opportunity for me to stay on a little bit longer, but I think that this is an opportunity for an entrepreneur to determine what's next. And so I have a lot of really great ideas, nothing that I'm going to make public yet, but I'm really looking forward to my next chapter, which will start mid-year 2024.
Amazing. Can't wait to see it. Thanks for your time. Thanks, and I hope to see you sooner than later.
Kidding me? This has been, I hope so too. Unless I see you first, buddy.
Thanks,
I don't even know if that made sense. But
cheers.
This is different, another round, so much more to talk about. Gonna aim to satisfy with help from CashFly. Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast. The Anycast podcast, brought to you by CashFly.